Hey guys, I'm Keith Wohr, and I'm up at Sandpoint Park, and today we're talking with Jeanie Huppert, and she's going to tell us about her son, Gary, and how she lost him on September 3rd of 2012 here in Titusville. She's a person who I met on Facebook and watches my videos that I usually do on the homeless, and she was kind enough to grant me an interview for you guys to kind of learn a little more about her and some of the victims of different crimes that we have in Titusville. So, Jeanie, tell us, when was the last time that you saw your son? When was the last time you spoke to him? What did you guys speak about?
Probably a few days before he was murdered on September the 3rd. He was very concerned about the neighbor himself that murdered him and Roger and shot Bruce. He was very concerned. I had taken him over a can of mace just in case something would happen, because Gary told me that Billy had told him, the guy that killed Gary, Gary told me that he told all of them that he was going to wait till they went to sleep.
So this was somebody Gary knew. This wasn't some random act of violence off the street.
They had been neighbors for 8 years, and his kids, his daughter Ava, played over in Gary's yard all the time. Gary's son, Corey, played over in Billy's house. Corey's even said, since this all happened, he said, "Man, and I can't believe I was actually in the house with the man that killed my dad." They were good friends, and it actually had started about a month prior to that. I mean, maybe even 3 weeks, probably 3 weeks before that. Gary was at home, and Destiny, his youngest daughter, was at church, and Billy accused her of stealing a roll of duct tape. It was nothing to do with a birthday gift, like they're saying in the court. From what I was told, and other people that were there that day when the police were there, it was Billy accusing Destiny of stealing duct tape, and Gary said she couldn't have stolen it. She's not even home.
So your son lost his life
Yes,
over a roll of duct tape,
Yes,
which is
was.
what, less than $5?
Well, actually, Gary had told me after that. He had told me about him accusing that. A few days later, he said that not every time, but when he would go outside, Billy would address him and say, "I want my roll of duct tape." And Gary would say, "I told you she didn't take your duct tape. She was at church. She's not even home." And finally, Gary said, he told him one day, he said, "You know what? I'm going down to Ace Hardware, and I'm going to buy you a new roll of duct tape." Because Gary wasn't a violent person. He was funny, he was carefree, he loved his kids, and he didn't like turmoil. He really didn't. No kind of turmoil. And he said he offered to go down to get him a new roll of duct tape at Ace Hardware. And he said, "I don't want a new roll, I want my roll." Well, Gary had told me a few days before that Billy had told him he was going to wait for all of them to go to sleep, and he was going to come in and kill all of them, including the kids and dogs.
Now this is the only interaction, only bad blood between the two, or were there other small, minor things? And I'm not placing blame on your son or any of the other victims, but were there any things that you think maybe your son did that maybe he shouldn't have done to antagonize, or
No, I don't.
you know what I mean, kind of push buttons? No, there wasn't any kind of goofing around that maybe somebody was more offended by than was meant to, or?
No, I know Gary's girlfriend made a statement, probably about 3 weeks before that, about having his daughter raped and sodomized, and which was a horrible thing.
Right,
Horrible.
terrible
It's
thing
terrible.
to say.
Gary was even trying to get her to move out of the house because Gary loved kids. His corner was like a daycare center. All the kids in the neighborhood came to Gary's house, and they played over there. It was like a playground over there. I would go to take him cookies, and I'd go up to Gary, "I can't get cookies for everybody." He would say, "Well, then don't bring them, because they can't eat them in front of them."
So your son and his children, and the person who shot your son, his children, they interacted, they knew each other, they played together.
Yes, they did. Yes, and my heart goes out to Ava. My heart.
His daughter.
Yes, that's his daughter. And She's played over Gary's house many times, just as Corey has played over their house a lot. And but that's what it started over. It started, I don't care what the defense says, it started over a roll of duct tape. And how they come up with the birthday gift, I don't know. That's the first time I heard about the birthday gift was in one of the videos, but I had never heard about a birthday gift.
Let me ask you this: your son lost his life, and he had how many children?
He had two sons and a daughter.
2 sons and a daughter, and those children, your grandchildren, have permanently lost their father, never to see him again. And now, on the flip side of things, the man who shot him, he has a wife and 2 children, and they're facing a similar thing. Right now, they can still visit their father, he's still alive, they can communicate with him and stuff, but they can't enjoy their life fully. And in fairness, if things were fair, if you could make the outcome anything you wanted, what would be the perfect and ideal outcome?
My perfect outcome, which, by the way, you have to understand, my grandchildren don't feel the same way. I would say life without parole. I don't think he should die. It's not going to bring Gary back. It's
Right.
not going to bring Roger back. But I'm the only one who feels like that.
So if you could trade the shooter's life for your son's life, then absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely,
if I
without
could-
a doubt.
My long-term saying is 2 wrongs don't make a right. And taking his life and leaving Ava and her brother without a dad is not going to solve none of this, but to get him off the street so that he could never ever harm another person again would give me some satisfaction. Nothing is going to make me better.
Nothing's ever going to bring your son back.
It's final. It's like I had talked to you before, it's different from other deaths. Everybody's going to experience death.
Right. We're all going to die.
Everyone's, hopefully, not many people bury their children, though, not many people do that.
How did you hear about your son's death?
It was probably 1:30 in the morning. The police didn't come to the house, so it was Roger's girlfriend, Tanya.
So late Saturday night, early
Yeah.
Sunday morning.
Yeah, and told my husband, and my husband came in the bedroom and turned the ceiling light on and took the blankets off, and I woke up. I said, "What are you doing? Are you crazy?" I'm sleeping.
Yeah, right.
And you could see something was wrong, and I went to get out of bed. And he said, "Jeanie, Gary's been shot." And I'm thinking, "Oh my God, Billy really shot him." Because I had taken Gary over a can of mace, and he told me that Billy said he was going to do this. I took him over a can of mace and stunt gun. What do you call those? Pellet gun. It's a pellet gun. And he just kind of laughed. I said, "Well, he won't know. It's not a real gun. Gary's never owned a gun. I've never owned a gun." And I thought it would at least mace him if he did try. I really didn't think he would. But anyway, I said,
Right, because you never know where things might lead.
No, people threaten.
But people say things all the time. They'll get angry and say, "You're dead. I'm gonna kill you. You're a dead man." And
But I went to get out of bed, and he went to home thinking, "Well, we got to get to the hospital." And he held me back, and he said, "Jeanie, he's gone." And I guess I don't, to this day, don't know what happened. Maybe shock, I don't know. I just went in and did like I always did and started taking care of business and just started calling people, just like it wasn't sinking in.
How many times was your son shot? Do you know the circumstances in which he died?
I was told he was shot 17 times and had 29 entry and exit wounds. He he was in the house and heard the gunshots outside. They had all been outside. They had a cookout, and he heard the gunshots outside, and it was from Billy shooting Bruce and Roger. And Gary came out of the house and yelled, "What the hell's going on out here?" And Roger's son, Justin, told me that Gary actually saved his life because after Billy shot Roger, Justin's dad, he was laying on the ground. He was coming at him with the gun. And he said, "Come on, man, I'm just a kid. I don't even know what's going on out." And then that's when Gary yelled and said, what the hell's going on out here? And he went over and shot Gary. And to this day, I wonder, what was my son thinking?
Was your son a person who was a peacemaker and would want to come out and kind of, hey, see if he could smooth things over, and maybe he thought he could go out and do that day? Do you think, in your heart of hearts, is that what you think as a mother?
I think he was just concerned, like when you hear these gunshots, what is it? What's going on out here? And I think that's what happened. But, Billy came around and shot Gary several times and went back. And it wasn't like he was finished. He went back to the two that was already laying on the ground, Bruce and Roger, and he shot them again, and but Gary wasn't dead yet. Gary yelled for the kids to run. If they would tell the truth, they would all tell you Gary loved children. And he's laying there dying, but he still yells for the kids to run. It cost him his life. Billy went back to him and shot him more. He was shot 17 times. And, as a mother to go to sleep, if they think that I could sleep at night, you go to bed and you think, I couldn't even see him. When I went to the funeral, I wanted to kiss him on the forehead. And they said, no, you don't. I've never left here without a kiss and a hug. I said, no, I don't want to see his body. I just want to kiss his forehead. They said, no, you don't. It will cause psychological damage for the rest of your life. I couldn't even see. I didn't want to see that. I just wanted our tradition, our little family thing was to kiss each other goodbye. But, you can't go to sleep at night knowing that your son was shot 17 times, a person that you protect all your life as a mother. You fix their little boo-boos, and murder's totally different, Keith. It's completely different from any other death. I think that people should be educated on this. Death is horrible. Death in itself is a horrible thing. It's so final. That in itself, the type of death is different. You have somebody that died in an accident, you could almost accept that there was an accident. They had a motorcycle wreck, or they fell off of a ladder, or dying with cancer. You have that time. But to know someone took your son's life, your child, your only son, he took his life from us. Not just for me, his kids. Breaks my heart. My grandson was there at the house today saying he just went out to the river. And that's where Gary took him. And he don't have to say a whole lot because he's told me before that this is where he goes. He will never see, his father will never see him get married. His father will never see him have children. He took that.
What do you think for Gary's children this will make? What would it take, do you think, for this to be over and to make it right for them?
They all want him dead. They want him to have capital punishment. And I've said, well, what about Ava?
Right, what about his children?
I said, what about Ava? And I said, and they said, well, we can't see our dad. And I said, but Ava didn't do anything. Of course, and neither did we, man. We didn't do anything either, why? And he even said he wants the judge to say he's not allowed to see his kids because he can't see his dad ever again. It wasn't Gary.
Right, in fairness.
Yeah, but you try to say, I try to talk to him and say, two wrongs don't make a right. That's my old saying. And if I thought for 1 minute that judge would say, we will take his life and bring your son back, I would have to do it in a heartbeat to have my son back. But I can't do that. That's not going to help anything. But like I said, I'm the only one.
There are a lot of people who will justify actions that they do like this and say, blame it on the way they were raised or post-traumatic stress. Like in this case, post-traumatic stress is being brought up and not really taking the responsibility for what they themselves did. Post-traumatic stress did not pull the trigger. Or, the gun itself did not go off by itself. And people talk about victims of gun violence. They always talk about this gun as though the gun, this inanimate object, got up and fired, but there was always a human being attached to the other end of this gun. And the human being that used this tool What is he saying is the excuse? What is he telling you and the world in court is the excuse for shooting and killing your son?
The first that I heard was his first statement was he just snapped that night. That was the first remark I heard. And then it went from he snapped to he was a combat veteran and had PTSD. And then after that it went to stand your ground. Well, how do you stand your ground when you leave the comfort of your own home? Your children are in bed, your wife is asleep, you have a camera on looking. To me, I would think that would be an invasion of privacy myself. If I remember correctly, Gary said the police came out and that camera was supposed to be directed on the road, not on somebody's private property. But he did, and of course in the videos it was enhanced to make it look like it was 20 times louder than it really was. When that train went by in that video, you would have thought the train track was on Park Avenue. It's down by Knox McRae or on Hopkins. It's nowhere near Gary's house. But I don't know what his next excuse will be. But as far as what you're saying about the guns, I've never owned a gun. I've never, in the past, before this, never had any opinion because, I've come from the country too. And they go, deer hunting and they hunt for rabbits. And I've just never heard of anybody being murdered. You just don't hear that. Right. So to take somebody's guns away, no, I don't think anybody should take everybody's guns away. But I think there should be background checks. I think people should be charged when given a stolen gun.
Even though they're veterans and they have veteran status, and people will say, well, hey, these guys of all people, they should have the right to own guns. They defended these freedoms. But do you think a veteran coming back with post-traumatic stress should be able to own a gun? Do you think that's wise?
I wouldn't say that to every person. Truthfully, I believe that anybody...
I'm talking about a veteran with post-traumatic stress.
Okay, I believe that any veteran or non-veteran, I really don't like to hear about veterans because I think that I appreciate the veterans.
I know,
my husband.
But in this case,
okay, but let me just explain. I think any person, you, me, my grandson, anyone who is going under psychiatric care for a mental condition that requires any medication that it acts as a mood stabilizer, such as PTSD, depression, anxiety, bipolar, any of that. If you have to have a medication to alter your mood, I don't believe you should be allowed to have a gun. It doesn't mean veterans, it means anybody. Because if you don't take that medication, you're right back where you started. And who is there to see that they have? Why would anybody give your son a gun who has PTSD? Why would a father give it? I saw a documentary one time where a man was so paranoid coming back from war and wanted a gun, and his dad gave him a gun with no bullets, but he slept with it for that security. Why would any father give his son a gun?
And whose father are we talking about?
I'm talking about any father, but Billy's father
gave
him, from what we were told, a stolen gun just hours before that shooting. Now, why would somebody do that if they know that person has post-traumatic stress? Don't cry about the post-traumatic stress afterwards. When you give a person, if you give your son a gun knowing he has post-traumatic stress, you're as much to fault as the person that did the shooting. Wouldn't you say? You don't have to agree with me. In my opinion.
Right. I empathize with you, but obviously, I haven't experienced this firsthand like you. I'm
glad you don't.
That my life is never touched by gun violence.
I can't watch the news now. I used to watch the news, and when there was a shooting, I just, you don't think anything of it.
Right. Now it's just another newscast.
Now my heart starts racing, to hear it. My heart races.
You think about that family and how it affected you?
I do. I think there's mothers out there, there's families out there. I don't, the people on Facebook, they'll say, oh, you're in my prayers, or blah, blah. I don't pray anymore. I lost my faith in God. I don't believe in God. Gary and Roger both were saved 2 weeks before that shooting. Where was God that night to let somebody be shot? He even had it in his wallet, his little card. Where was God? Where was God that night? I don't believe in God anymore. I really don't.
How about the human beings that are in this case, and the police and the prosecutors? How have they been towards you? Do you feel that they've shown you compassion, understanding?
I don't. Yeah, I had a couple of meetings. I'm not satisfied always with the meetings. I don't think they're really on anybody's side, but I tried to find out the facts firsthand. I will hear a rumor, I go and ask them. I know about 6 months after Gary was killed, I got a phone call. I was coming home from the grocery store, and I got a phone call and said I could come up and pick up Gary's belongings. And while it was very emotional looking at Gary's phone that was in his left pocket, it was shot. The glass was broke out of it. It was very emotional, but Gary was like me in taking pictures. He'd love to take pictures, and I couldn't wait to get it plugged in and get these pictures. And when I tried to plug it in, the SD card was gone. So I called the police station and asked where the SD card was. So we gave it back the way we got it.
But you didn't find it?
No. And Gary had an SD card. Gary was on my phone bill. We were on the family plan.
Right.
And I had the reader, the card reader. I used to take his SD card and get his pictures off and put them on CDs so he wouldn't lose them. But the card was gone. Of course, I can't say where it went.
Right.
I know it's gone.
So were you able to recover any of those pictures?
Yes, I did. They said they couldn't. But I took it to a flea market.
If they couldn't, how were you able to recover?
I went to couple places. I went to AT&T. I went up to Daytona Flea Market, and the guy in the booth did it for me.
A guy at a flea market was able to recover pictures that the police department could not.
That's correct. And then I was excited when I saw the pictures and things that Gary had taken, because Billy's original statement is, "Oh my God, these people harassed us. We couldn't go anywhere without an escort." And here's a picture of Billy sitting across the street from Gary's house, and he's giving him the finger. Gary had told me that he went to take his garbage out. Billy stood up and raised his shirt, showed him a gun, said, "You ready to die? Come on out here." Gary said, "I'm not that stupid." He went back in and called the police. There was a lot of pictures, and I'm thinking, oh wow, this is going to show. He's lying. He went out all the time. He walked the neighborhood with a knife on the side of his. They don't tell that on the news. I don't know why, but they don't tell that part on the news, how he walked the neighborhood with the knife. They don't tell that it was a four-corner stop. And he could have walked his dog to the right, he could have went straight, he could have went out toward him. But no, he deliberately went by Gary and Bruce's house and deliberately aggravating them for days and days and days.
What kind of guy was Gary? Was Gary passive? Was Gary a guy who would want to get somebody back, or was he somebody who was a prankster? I mean, who was he as a human being?
Gary was the most loving, caring father. I have to say that first. His children were number one in his life, which I think upset him because of him accusing Destiny of stealing that duct tape. Especially when he tried to offer to buy him a nude roll when he wouldn't take it. He tried. Gary was not a fighter. He didn't like arguing. He was fun. He liked to dance. He loved his family. We came down here every year on the 4th of July. Our holidays are never the same. It was.
Well, the reason I ask you about this...
He's never been in a fight in his life. That helped. Never.
Well, I'm asking you this because I saw on television, like a lot of other people, they made this big deal about Gary and posing with this gun and
No, they didn't say Gary.
I mean, in our culture, games or video games like Call of Duty are popular. It's popular to pose with a gun or...
That was Roger. Roger had many profile pictures, but
these are just fun-loving things that are just being blown out of proportion. Right. So Gary really wasn't this rough and tumble, wanting to start fights, and
not at all.
He wasn't violent.
Not at all. Never. No, he'd never been in a fight, even as a kid, never been in a fight in his life. He was a peacemaker. He didn't like drama. He tried to, if I would say, oh, guess what, blah, blah, he'd say, I don't want to hear it, drop it, He was a loving, caring person, loved kids. He loved his family. He did love video games. Roger had just moved in. He didn't really move in. He stayed there while he was waiting on an apartment. They were going to move into an apartment. And him and Roger knew each other for 16 years. Even Justin said, I lost 2 dads that night. Because Roger said, don't know life without Gary. They've been friends forever, all of Justin's life. And
did your son Gary grow up here in Titusville?
We originally lived outside of Cincinnati. We moved down here, I think he was about 12 years old.
So he went to high school here. He had all his important years of getting his driver's
He had
license
just-
and dates and dances and school activities and things like that.
He had just gotten hired out at the Kennedy Space Center, but I think, he got hired on his birthday, I think, August the 10th. He had just turned 39. He was so proud of that job. He was been laid off for a while and really proud to have that job. And one of his kids thinks that jealousy played a part in the shooting, that there was jealousy because while Billy was not a bad person, he wasn't, I don't know how you would describe Gary, it's just he loved everybody. One of his neighbors down the street told me that he used to say, Gary, I have a plumbing problem, and Gary'd fix it. He'd go to pay him, and he'd say, no, I'm not taking money from a neighbor. You're my buddy, my neighbor. And no, you take him, you got kids. And Gary was just a loving person. If Gary, I don't think it'd be any different if he was a creep. I'm his mother, but he really, no, Gary was a good person. I'm very, very proud of Gary. I always will be. He didn't have to.
Didn't have to die like this.
I can't even say die. He didn't die. He didn't die. He took his life from us. Now I have a granddaughter that I can't see. She was taken off to Ohio, and our lives will never be the same.
Your family life is totally split up since he's...
Well, like I said, my grandsons come to see me, and that wasn't the first incident with Billy either. One of my grandsons went over, not Gary's kids, but went over to see Gary. And Billy came over one day and pulled a knife on him, thinking it was another grandson. And he said, are you, my other grandson's name? And he goes, no. And he said, well, it's a good thing or I would have killed you. But, he never told me about it at the time because he knows I would not have let him go over there unless I was with him, if it was that unsafe with Billy. But Billy wasn't a bad person all the time. He really, not all the time. He really wasn't.
So you knew him. You knew, or you know
of him? Yeah. I know. I was on the phone one day, and me and Gary and I were talking, and I heard a woman say, Gary, will you help me? And Gary's talking to them, and I thought something happened to the kids, and one of my great kids, and I said, what's wrong? And he said, hold on a minute, and he's talking to the lady, and it ended up, it was Barbara, Billy's wife, and Gary said, Mom, I'll call you back, and he called back, and Billy hadn't taken his medicine that morning and was going down the street in his underwear, and Gary went out, put his arm around him. No, they were friends. And Gary said, come on, buddy, let's go home, get your medicine, and we'll do something. But Barbara don't tell that, does she? And you know what? The truth's the truth, what? No matter what happens in court, no one will ever change my mind because I know what happened. I know who my son was. I know that was I know it was planned. I know the court of law, you can't go and say, I can't tell him what Gary told me because that's hearsay evidence. There's a lot of things that you can't say, but he didn't tell Gary that. He was going to wait till they went to sleep, and he was going to come over and kill all of them, including the kids and dogs. My son told me that. I can tell you that. I'm not going to win the case, but I can tell you that because they can't use that.
This is just awful for everyone. It's awful for your family and your grandkids. This is awful for his family,
Billy's
his
mother,
children.
oh my God. Now, his father, I don't have an ounce of sympathy for. He laughs at us, and I hope whoever sees this, understands that even though I love my town, we moved
So you just
down
want
here.
him to be a human
Leave
being.
me alone. Leave us alone. We were in Cracker Barrel eating dinner, my husband and I, and Gary's youngest son, Corey. And his dad just looks at us and smiles and it laughs. And waitresses saw it. Waitresses saw it. And I reported him to the Brevard County property appraisers because I wasn't going to let that happen to us anymore. We're going through it to laugh at us. And then one day
It makes you feel like a victim every time.
And look at the news. I mean, the news media, it's almost like they condone murder. What is going on in this world today? They condone someone taking somebody's life, somebody's father, somebody's son. I don't understand. It's a crazy world today. It really is a different world that we live in. You didn't hear these kind of things before. They talk about the Constitution and your amendments. This didn't go on. Is it because of these medications and drugs? I don't know. I just know it's a totally different world that we live in.
So how do you feel now when you hear of neighbors having disputes and things like that? Does it put you on edge? Does it make you nervous?
You just try to tell them. I have had a situation. My sister had a neighbor, and I told her, I said, my son's dead. Please don't say nothing. Don't do anything.
Makes you think twice before you give somebody the finger when you're driving on the street.
And it's easy to do because, honestly, I didn't give him the finger, but I had that so much from Billy's dad, laughing at us. Here's Corey sitting there, Gary's son, and he's not going to cry in front of us, but he's got his head down, and I didn't even know who he was. I said, he kept staring at me and laughing. And I said, is that Billy's dad in front of me? He said, yes. I said, what is the hell does he think is so funny?
You, antagonizing
but you can't do nothing about it. I called. You can't do anything about it because he didn't hit me. He didn't threaten me.
He didn't threaten, right?
What kind of, to me, the apple did not fall far from the tree.
What kind of a human being would see your suffering?
I feel sorry for his own mother. I really do. I feel sorry for Billy's mother.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for Ava. I feel sorry for Billy's brother. To think that they have to go through this.
Yeah.
That they do get to see him. They can't talk to him, but to think, I couldn't imagine being in their shoes. But I'd rather be in their shoes than in my shoes. At least you could go visit him. And, I would trade places any day. I think Titusville is a beautiful place. I appreciate your stories on the homeless. I think it's a beautiful place. I'm not mean with you. I love this place. My son's here.
What's changed for you?
It's changed.
Your son's buried here?
Oh, yeah, I got my husband. He insists he wants to be buried in the VA cemetery, and I don't want to. I don't want to. I want to be buried by my son. So he got me a lot next to my son. I'll carry this with me. You ask what kind of justification. I'll never go on ever again the person I was, never. But we didn't lose just Gary. You have to understand Roger was our friend too. Roger had a son. I feel bad for his son. He told me that, like New Year's, it's the same with all of them. New Year's Eve, I wasn't even there. Can you imagine what that was like for his son to be here? Now New Year's Eve, when everybody's doing their fireworks and stuff, he can't stand it. Himself, Roger's son, I can't imagine. Bruce, I can't imagine what Bruce is going through. Shot 11 times. I think he said he had 13 surgeries. And they asked why he didn't kill him. He said, I ran out of bullets. Yeah, he's really sorry, and no remorse. No remorse at all. How do you take a human being away? And these people probably go to church. I bet you they go to church. I bet you they're church people. But they'll say, they condone what he did. No, if he's sick, get him help.
Right,
Don't
right.
wait till he kills somebody.
Right.
Don't give him a gun
Right.
5 hours before a shooting or however hours it was. Don't do that.
You would think if somebody could take the time to give them a gun, they could take the time to pick up a phone and call a psychiatrist or call the Veterans Administration and make an appointment for their loved one to get the help instead of handing them a weapon.
Why did his father call him? You know, I don't know if you watched the Stand Your Ground trial, but it was the first that I had heard when I saw Barbara on the stand. And she was telling about that night, how everything was peaceful all that day, and then they went to their mother-in-law's and they had a surprise anniversary party. They were having a good time, you know. Typical family, just like we had done. Went to Ramada and swimming. I couldn't tell you how many times me and Gary and the kids all went to Ramada. You know, you're like them, you know, you're like her.
Right,
and
same
having a
life
nice
experiences, same
Yeah,
family.
went to the zoo. We've done it so many times, you know. And then his
Lives
father,
are so parallel.
And then his father calls him and says, the problem with the neighbors escalating. And then they leave and have to come home. What problem? They wasn't home. Was it any of their business? What problem? What was his dad doing over there? I mean, I know it's a free country. You could go wherever you want, but
Right.
Why did his dad call him? Why did his dad, I believe, in my opinion, aggravated the situation. I really do. And truthfully, I don't condone when somebody does something wrong. When Gary's girlfriend said that about Billy's daughter, I would have been outraged too. I probably would have done something that day. Called the police, you got a video camera.
Right, right, with sound of all these things.
You got everything. You know, but why wait? You know, they had already gone to court trying to get restraining orders. They apologized to each other there. They apologized. And then 5 days later, he shot. But he didn't kill Kim. He didn't kill the ones that, you know, the one that said that about sodomizing his daughter. She was standing. She came out the door with Gary. He didn't kill her. So, not that I say she should die.
Right.
Nobody should take anybody's
Right.
life, but
Right,
did
over
that
words and threats.
5 days later after the court, it was almost a month that she had said that. 3 weeks, a month, that statement. It was a horrible statement. Gary was trying to get her to move.
A few inches over.
No, but I mean, Gary really was trying to make her move out. That upset him because he loves kids.
Right, and to think that everybody involved had only about a month left to live there before everyone was supposedly going to go their own separate ways.
I don't.
It's so senseless.
Yeah, I know Roger, his apartment wasn't ready yet, and
I
they were gonna
understand,
move.
but it's not like, you know.
Why didn't they? My husband said, Jeanie, I'm telling you, if I was in his situation and I fear for my life, you and the kids would be out that door and back over at the mother-in-law's. If I was that concerned, I would not wait till everybody went to sleep, dress in camo jacket, load my guns, and start crawling. What was it, 30 minutes? Almost 30 minutes crawling. You're telling me he didn't know what he was going to do? He knew exactly what he was going to do. He knew exactly. He planned that. Just like he did on the courthouse. When he beat Gary, and he said to Kim, you're next. I'll catch you out on the street one day too. 5 days later, they're dead. Not Kim, but the others were dead.
I hope that you and your family can find some peace through what happens with the legal system here. And I don't know what's fair. I'm not an expert on what's fair. I'm just a fellow citizen of Titusville. I appreciate you coming out here and telling me your story, and for me to be able to share this with everybody else. And I hope that nobody else has to share the same kind of pain you do. And I really appreciate you coming out and doing this interview.
This has no reflection on Titusville, though. Really, Titusville's a beautiful city. They're always trying to progress, you know, and I love Titusville. You know, even if Gary wasn't buried here, I would never leave Titusville. There's bad and good in every city.
Right.
Every city has it, even little small towns, and it has no reflection on the city.
Still love living.
I love it here.
All right. Well, I think we're going to go for now. But like I said, I really appreciate this, and I hope people who see this think about when they have a dispute with a neighbor or they get cut off on the street to kind of think, you know, do they really wish that guy dead? Do they really wish his children not to have their parent or grandparent or brother or sister alive anymore because of a perceived wrong? And I hope that people get something out of this and see your pain and make better choices before they act. So,
one
go
other
ahead.
thing,
What would you like to say?
please make sure people understand that. Be careful with your Facebook profile picture too. But because Roger playing that game Call of Duty and had a picture, wasn't even his gun, but had the defense said that tells who you are. Not that Roger shot anybody. He didn't shoot anybody, but be careful with your profile pictures. You never know how that's going to be used against you. Silly. The other person kills them, but well, I appreciate you doing this. And thank you for your videos on the homeless too.